this entire text of Vivekachudamani is in the form of a dialogue between a teacher and a student. And a student is asking 7 questions. And the question is, Ko nama bandha, kadhamesha agada, kadham pradishthasya, kadham vimokshaha, koso anatma, paramaka atma, tayo viveka, kadhameta uchyedam. This is the context. This text could be understood and appreciated in the light of these 7 questions and answers. The first question, what is the nature of bondage? So bondage should be understood to be the inherent limitation of empirical worldly experiences. That's how it should be understood, bondage. Literal meaning is something that binds you, that ties you, that traps you. But here the meaning is a kind of inherent natural limitation or incompleteness of human existence. What Buddha calls dukkha, that is the meaning of here bandha, means bondage. How it came about, then what is its foundation, how to get out of it, and what is the impermanent, the non-everlasting, the transient, and then what is the eternal, what is the permanent, the transcendental, paramaka atma. So that is what is being discussed right now. What's the nature of the absolute reality? And that is discussed, that particular subject is discussed in verse number 126, if you may remember. Verse number 126 is the answer to the question, Paramaka Atma, what is the nature of the absolute reality? Atate sampravakshyami surupam paramatmanaha yad vijñāya naro bandhat mukta kaivalyam asnuti. So, by knowing what, we will get spiritual liberation. And what is the nature of the absolute reality, by knowing which we attain our spiritual liberation? Here, we have to understand, bondage means our sense of attachment to all that is non-eternal, primarily the body and senses. This is the nature of human life. We identify, we define ourselves to be the physical body. And all that is related to the physical body, the senses, the mind, different objects of enjoyment. That's how we normally identify ourselves. That's our true identity, normally speaking. And Vedanta tells you that our identity is something much higher, transcendental. That's what Vedanta tells you. This contrast, there is a contrast actually. This paradox. What we see is this body and our senses, and what we enjoy or suffer because of the various empirical experiences. What we see, what we hear, all these are experiences that we identify with. And that gives us a lot of problems. All the problems are due to this simple factor. That is, we identify ourselves with this body. So Vedanta tells you that the moment you identify yourself as your true nature, then that is liberation. So bondage is identification with this body and all related things. And liberation is going beyond this identification. I have mentioned this on many occasions. This has got a very practical application. Whatever we suffer or enjoy in this world, if we can think of ourselves as something higher than this body, you find many of the everyday problems become manageable. That's a simple experience. It doesn't mean that these problems do not exist. Illness, bad health, job insecurity, lack of enough resources, anxieties, worries, all these are inevitable, inescapable problems of life in this world. And there is no way to get out of it. Actually, a problem-free life is only a myth. If the richest person, the man with the utmost resources, is not the happiest. So, life minus problems is impossible. Everyone has his own problems. It's very important. That's why one of the Mahabharata statement is, the only way to become happy is not to seek happiness. It doesn't mean that you should seek unhappiness, but when we normally seek happiness, what we are doing is, we are looking for an experience, we are looking for something that makes us happy all the time, and such a thing is impossible to exist in this world. This is the nature of reality. So, once we identify ourselves as something other than this body and senses, problem solved. Again, there will be difficulties. Those difficulties have to be confronted. You have to confront them. Whether you don't have money, you have to make money. If you don't have a job, you need a job. If you have bad health, you should get treatment. All these things are there. But the point is, the moment we stop identifying with this body alone as our true identity, then all these problems become manageable. Otherwise, what happens is, the minutest, the smallest bodily problems become or appears to be a great disaster. And that gives us a lot of anxiety and worry. It is not problem that actually give us problems. The worry about the problems, the anxiety or a sense of botheration that we identify, that we attach the problems, that's a real problem. That's a very interesting principle. Problems are not real problems. Our worries about these problems is the real problem. So the moment we stop identifying ourselves as the most insignificant part of a personality, that is this body, then our problem solved. Why do we call this body as the most insignificant aspect? Body comes and goes, but Vedanta tells you that there is something within the body or something associated with the body that comes, goes, but returns. And we call this, even the healthiest man may live for 100 years. They may suffer and enjoy. But Vedanta tells you he will be reborn again. According to his own samskaras, his own tendencies, he will be reborn again. So life is not one chance. The moment we identify ourselves with this body alone, what happens? Even the minutest problem, bodily problem, can be a disaster. So that's why the teacher is promising here, the 126th verse, Adate sampravakshyami surupam paramatmanaha. So, now I am going to teach you the true nature of the absolute reality, by knowing which yad vijnaya naro bendhat mukta kaivalyam asnade. By knowing that absolute reality, you get liberation. Why do we get liberation from this? What kind of liberation? The moment we stop identifying ourselves as the body alone, at the moment we start identifying ourselves as Atman, as the divine spark present in all of us, that moment we become free from that obsessive identification, obsessive attachment with our body. Then you may get, some doctors may tell you have a health problem, but it will not shock you. Okay, you go ahead, you solve the problem. But that will not be a shock to you. There's a great difference actually. You have to remember this. One may have health problem. The health problem should not become a source of great worry. You should solve the problem. When you don't have a job, you should get a job. If you don't have resources, you have to generate resources. That's absolutely undeniable. That is unavoidable. The problem is that small illness of the body is a great disaster. It is the end of everything. That kind of worry, that kind of anxiety, that kind of fear will be gone the moment we identify ourselves as something higher than the body. And that is actually the first step to Kaivalyam. Kaivalya means moksha, liberation, or spiritual enlightenment in a broader sense. That's it. That is the 126th verse. And then we discussed, of course, it elaborately, 127, 28, 29, 130, 129 we discussed already. This Atman is our true nature. And one important point, remember, is in different religious traditions, there are different ways of, different methods of describing and defining the absolute reality. Broadly speaking, there are 5 stages in the evolution of God, or you may call it the absolute reality. The first step is pantheism, we call it. Those who are familiar with American history, Emerson was a great example of being a pantheist, Henry Thoreau, in a greater sense, because they identify, or in maybe in European history, one well-known pantheist who was not a philosopher but a poet was William Wordsworth. So according to them, this empirical nature, the mountains, valleys, the rivers, trees and sky and clouds, all that you see that captivate your eyes, that sense of awe, grandeur, beauty, something transcendental. And they think that is God for them, nothing more. So the beauty, the grandeur, the magnitude, the transcendental charm of this world, this empirical world, for them, that's the highest expression of the divine. It's called pantheism, equating God with the empirical world. Pantheism is the next stage in ascending order. In pantheism, you identify yourself with an inherent inner spirit within nature. Many of the beliefs in the ancient Native American religious traditions, so Greek mythology religions, and in many of the Vedic mantras, Rigveda Samhita especially, you can see the, for example, Dev Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithivi Shanti, Roshadaya Shanti, Vanaspadaya Shanti. You find these mantras, these prayers, let there be peace in the sky, on earth, in the clouds, in trees, in mountains, in valleys, in oceans. Let there be peace everywhere. So equating the divine with the empirical nature. And that is called pantheism, where you equate the divine with the empirical nature, but you also identify that there is an inner indweller, a divine spirit within these different natural phenomena. It's called pantheism. Then polytheism implies, well, behind the river there is a divine. So in Vedic tradition, when Varuna, the god, the divine spirit behind oceans, Dyava Prithivi, so you find behind the air, the sky, the mountains, behind this there is a presiding deity. This is called the polytheism, when believe in different gods and goddesses. Indra, Varuna, Agni, all these are different names of gods and goddesses in Vedic tradition. And if you want an example, maybe the best example I can refer to when I get this Western audience will be if you read Homer's Iliad. You find all the Greek gods and goddesses coming and joining the Trojan War. Some are fighting on the side of the Trojans, and some are fighting on the side of the Greeks, you can find. Apollo, Jupiter, and different gods and goddesses, both feminine and masculine deities you find in Greek religions, ancient pre-Christian Greek mystery religions. Mostly before Christianity became the accepted religion, the Greek had a very beautiful, wonderful religious tradition. And one interesting good thing about them is they were very broad-minded. They used to interfere in the affairs of the human beings. So you find in Homer's Iliad, gods and goddesses fighting on the side of Trojans and also among Greeks you find. Both sides you find. So you call it polytheism, belief in different gods and goddesses. Poly means multiple gods and goddesses. So pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, and then monism. Monotheism. The fourth one is monotheism, where you believe in one supreme God, creator God. Most of the Abrahamic religions and popular Hindu Puranic traditions are examples. One God, who is, of course, in Hindu tradition, there are many supreme gods and goddesses. So not strictly monotheistic, but still believe that when the follower of Vishnu think Vishnu is the highest concept of a monotheistic Godhead. But in Brahmic traditions, that God creates this world. He creates all human beings and animals. In the beginning there was God, and the Genesis you find. So finally God created man in his own form and then asked him if he is master of the whole creation. The Genesis you find. An example of monotheism in Abrahamic tradition, both Judaism and Islam. So, pantheism, nature worship, roughly speaking, in a very broad sense. Pantheism, where you identify with some divine spirit within the natural phenomena, an indweller. Polytheism, different gods and goddesses who control this natural phenomena. Monotheism, one supreme deity, who is the presiding deity, was created. In fact, the whole concept of creationism, or we find the earliest of the great Christian theological evolution world, St. Augustine is a supreme example, first example, or St. Aquinas and others, example of monotheistic Godhead. And of course in Judaism and also other Arabian traditions. Now, in Hinduism, there is another higher idea. That's what we are coming to. Monism. So monism means you think of one absolute reality which has got a personal aspect but also an impersonal aspect. The transcendental aspect, going beyond form. That is monism. So what it means, it accommodates and accepts all other views, but going beyond all these views. So it accommodates, accepts pantheism, pantheism, polytheism and monotheism, but also says there is higher divine reality, and to realize that divine reality is the supreme goal of human existence. And that divine reality is defined as an indweller, means as existing in everyone, as the inner spirit, as a divine spark, present in everything and everywhere. It is present everywhere, present in everything. And also it is transcendental. It goes beyond everything. Now, this supreme reality can manifest with form. So all these creation ideas or creation, different definitions of religion, in creationist tradition, where God is defined as a creator of the world, is one way of looking at this divine reality in a personal way, with form. Of course, remember, in Abrahamic monotheism, God doesn't have a form, but he has attributes, qualities. So really speaking, God doesn't have a form, but God is addressed as He is compassionate. He creates His world. It's also popular Hinduism, you find, Shiva, Vishnu, creates His world, listens to your prayers. But no form, but attributes, compassion, all these qualities. This is not wrong according to monistic idea. This is not wrong, but as you evolve to a higher level of your own spiritual evolution, then you reach a higher experience, a higher understanding of the same reality. And I mentioned in my last class, the best example from Christian theological tradition is the example of Meister Eckhart. Probably the only Advaitin as a theologian, as a philosopher in Christian tradition. All of this was strictly monotheistic. But Eckhart said, this monotheistic definition of God falls short of the highest reality. It is not wrong, but there is a higher experience of the same reality, going beyond the definitions of God in terms of Holy Trinity. So, here what you are finding is, see for example, asti kasi swayam nityam agam pratyalambanaha avastatraya sakshi san panchakosa vilakshanaha, 127th verse. Here, the Supreme Reality is not defined as sitting somewhere after creating this world, listening to your prayers. No. There is a higher understanding of the same. Again, we have to remember this to be emphasized again and again. This concept never rejects. It never rejects other views. It doesn't say, never says that monotheistic ideas are wrong. No. But then, as part of your own spiritual evolution, when you reach a higher level of your own spiritual experience, that the same monotheistic God is perceived and realized as an impersonal, transcendental, divine spark. And then it is, so here it is beyond definition, but you can try to make some rough idea of what it is. It is beyond explanation, but then you have to use words in a book. So it says, for example, aham pratyalambanaha. So when we identify ourselves as I, I. So I'm walking, you are defining you as a body is walking. I'm happy, you are defining yourself as your mind, because your mind, happiness is a state of human mind and emotions. I don't like this book, or I like this book. Maybe your intellect is defined. I don't like means your intellect doesn't like it. But suppose my intellect is a possessive case, my intellect is Shashti Vibhakti. So if you say my intellect, that intellect should be an object. You are identifying yourself as something distinct from the intellect. That I, if you really go in search of the true source of this I consciousness, that I is the absolute reality, Atman. And then is again another avastatraya sakshi. The one who is the witness, the subject, the seer, the perceiver, what you call drashta in Sanskrit, sakshi, the witness of all the experiences that we undergo in waking state, in dream state and deep sleep state. That is avasthatraya sakshi. It is present there, it is aware of it, but distinct from it. The sakshi means witness. If you would be called a witness, you should be aware of what you claim to be witness of, but you should be not involved in that. So that supreme reality. This is one way of trying to explain this inexplicable, trying to describe the indescribable Atman. Now, one important point which I often want to repeat again and again is, this view, it never rejects, never refuses to accommodate or accept other views, but it says it's a part of our own spiritual evolution. When we reach a higher level of spiritual evolution, then we are able to experience the presence of the divine outside the holy book, whatever book that we may read in Hinduism, Christianity, or Judaism, any book. Outside the place of worship, God is not limited to a church or a temple. He is present everywhere. And God is present in everything. So this is the only way in which you can get an idea of this absolute reality, which cannot actually be described. So indescribable reality is being described here. That's the idea behind. And then, in the 128th, Yo Vijana Sagalam Jagra Sukma Sushuptisu Buddhi Tadvritti Sadbhavam Abhavam Aham Ityayam. So, this Atman, it knows everything. So, even the very concept of awareness is this reality. So, sometimes this reality is defined as prajna, awareness. Not awareness connected to an object. Normally when I'm aware of this book, I'm aware of this something or other. This awareness is linked to something. I am aware of something. But suppose you can think of awareness itself. Pure awareness, prajna. Sometimes this divine reality, at the monistic level, this divine reality is defined as pure awareness, which is present in all the three states of human consciousness. In waking state, in dream state, and also in deep sleep state. Even when you say, I didn't know, to say, to be aware that you did not know, there should be an awareness. Even so, I knew that, or I did not know that. If this awareness is absent in us, how do we know that we did not know it? So in the absence of understanding, awareness, there should be that awareness is there. So this should not be misunderstood. To give an example, when we normally say, well, I'm aware of what happened this morning. I'm aware of what happened 10 years ago. So here, I'm talking about my own understanding or my memory of something that happened 10 years ago. So awareness is there on one. And then what happened, what I'm aware of, that also is there. But suppose if you can think of awareness minus what it is aware of, that is called pure awareness, prajnanam it's called. That is another way of understanding or defining this non-definable, describing the indescribable Atman. Now this is too much of a philosophy of my thing, but this way of looking at the absolute reality of God as a very, very practical importance even in modern times. Every monotheistic idea, which is so grand and great, if you can think of God as a compassionate person, but if that God is only compassionate to followers of one tradition, which accepts him in that way, then that can lead to fanaticism and narrow-mindedness. On the other hand, if we understand this Advaitic principle and then study different religious traditions, you can be a wonderful follower of any religious tradition without fanaticism. That is why Swami Vivekananda in modern times said, every religious tradition has the inner potential. It contains the element of Advaita. Advaita means this universal divine reality. That means understanding God not as defined in one particular book or one particular hierarchy, but understanding God as the all-pervading divine reality. And that divine reality manifests in so many different ways, expressed in so many different traditions, so many books, in so many vocabularies, so many cultures, in diverse ways. Now, once we understand this, it's a great antidote to many of the problems that we are facing today. So, Advaita has got a great moral and ethical significance. It's a very important thing. Advaita, or monistic idea, has got a great, tremendous moral and ethical significance because it liberates our mind, it broadens our outlook. So that's why in modern times, Vivekananda and many others have tried, the infinite one of the soul is the eternal sanction of all morality, all ethics, and all good actions. Universal compassion, love and compassion, good feeling towards everyone cannot be a reality without some element of Advaita. So now again you find in different traditions, whenever a great saint or a mystic tried to break through the barriers of hierarchy and theology, they always had a glimpse into this transcendental experience, the universal experience. And that's called mysticism. Anyway, so that's one thing. Now today, I'm going to take up the next verse. I think I already discussed here the last. Yena vishwamidam vyaptam yam na vyapnoti kinchana abharupamidam sarvam yam bhandam anubhatyayam. So again, this absolute reality is again explained here, So that light, that reality by which this whole universe is covered, enveloped, and that reality which is never enveloped by anything, that's the supreme effulgence, supreme light, supreme effulgent one. And it is this reality that gives light to everything in this world. Everything else gets its light and existence from this supreme reality. So this is one way of explaining this. So now, again, this is explained as the light. Abharupamidam sarvam yam bhantam anubhatyayam. So, wherever you find light, light here could mean knowledge or existence or awareness, anything can be called light. So, everything that is effulgent in this world gets its effulgence from this supreme reality. So, without the presence of the divine, nothing can move in this world. Frequently it is mentioned that reality never walks. Atman never walks, but you cannot walk without Atman being present in you. Atman never does anything, but every action is possible because of the presence of the Atman within you. Like that. Now again, This is a higher philosophy in Vedanta. Something which cannot be explained. So how is that inexplicable reality being explained here? It says, nothing can happen in this world without the Atman being present. Atman never does anything. Atman is the source of all light. Light means knowledge. The source of all existence, the source of all consciousness. Ahankaradi dekhanda vishayas sukhadeha vedinte ghadavadyena nityabodha surupina. So, this idea that it is a witness, the idea is again and explained and emphasized here. It is one way of understanding is that it is the eternal knowledge. So whatever we have, for example, our mind, our intellect, our memory, our emotions and feelings, all these are possible because of this Atman. So ahankaradi dehanda vishayasa sukhadeha vedyante ghadavadyena nityabodha surupina. So you can imagine this Atman is understood, or one way of definition is the knower, the witness. It is aware of all that is happening in our mind, in our emotions and feelings, everything. It is beyond all this, but at the same time, it is involved in the functions of all this. And when this Atman is present, everything is visible, everything is manifesting. That's the idea behind. So, all the sense objects, the physical body, enjoyment and awareness, all these are possible because of this Atman. And then, so there are, remember, we are trying to explain what is beyond explanation. Now, in Vedanta, when you want to explain something, anything in this world, you have to explain it in the light of some well-known facts. For example, if suppose you are trying to introduce your friend to another person, you may introduce it, this is my friend, or this is my brother, things like that, or sister, mother, and so on. So some kind of connection, relationship, it is called, it is called some relationship. Jadi, guna, sambandha, karma, etc. There are different ways of explaining in Vedantic tradition. It's called the 5 ways of verbalization or description. When you introduce a person who is a musician, you are introducing him by pointing out what he does. He sings songs, he composes, so he called a musician. When you introduce a person as a gardener, you are introducing him in connection with what he does. He's a gardener. Similarly, when you introduce, as I mentioned just now, you introduce your brother, your friend, you are introducing him in the light of some connection, we call it sambandha. Or you may introduce, let's say, an animal. That animal belongs to a particular generic group and so on. You introduce a tree, it belongs to one particular group. So, or you are talking about a flower, you are talking about the flower is a yellow flower, green flower, some property, quality. So, dravya, guna, sambandha, karma, all these are some of the different ways of verbalization called Panja Sabda Pravrutti in Vedanta. It's a very well-known concept. Those who are interested in Christian theology may get a bit of this in Eckhart's understanding of Supreme Godhead, Supreme Being, which he says you cannot define the transcendental truths. Even to call God as God itself is a limitation, because God is infinite beyond limitation. If you define something, if you describe something, it becomes limited, finite. The infinite cannot be described. In the ancient Vedic mantra is there, Andai Bahuvadinam Anandai Mukham. What it means is, you can define the finite in terms of properties, qualities, nature, action. But the definition of the infinite is silence, or description of the infinite is silence. So again this continues, Esho Antaratma Purusha Purana Nirindrakhanda Sukhanubhuti Sadaiga Rupa Pratibodha Matru Yeneshidavu Vag Asavas Charanti Vag Asavaha Charanti. By whose presence, who is prompting our senses of action, senses of perception into different activities. We are walking, our senses of action are involved because Atman within us. So a dead man doesn't walk. The Atman is withdrawn from the dead body. According to Vedanta, when a person dies, the Atman withdraws itself from the physical body, from the mind, the sensory system, the mind intellectual system. The Atman only withdraws itself from it, and it migrates to another body mechanism. So the person is born again, the same Atman, this idea behind. So you are able to walk because Atman is present. You are able to do things because Atman is present. Now again I have to mention to you, this idea of Advaita never rejects creationism or monotheism. It only tells you that as you grow to a higher level of spiritual experience, then you experience the presence of the God everywhere, in everything, not in a temple or a church, but also outside. And then what happens is, all our actions, whatever we do, whatever we speak, become spiritualized. So spirituality, according to Advaita, is not something that we practice when we are in the temple. It is something that we practice not only in the temple, but outside. So every place is a temple. Every living being is a manifestation, expression of the divine. This is the nature of the absolute reality. Paramak Atma, that question and his answer. So this continues for some time. So I have just discussed some of the earlier verses, very elaborate description, but I am trying to make it as simple as possible. Now you are most welcome with questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your lecture, Swamiji. I know there's different ways of looking at it, different metaphysical systems. In Sankhya, they talk about Purusha and Prakriti. And correct me if I'm wrong, that Purusha is conscious but inactive, and Prakriti's active but unconscious. So, and then I guess with Vedanta, they talk about Brahman, and I guess Atman is equal to Brahman. So, is another way of looking at Atman, is it like the animating principle that, certain, life forms have some sort of difference than inanimate? We do, at least in biology, we define it animate versus inanimate. But then on the other hand, it's if all is Brahman, how is this animate versus inanimate related to this monistic idea of Brahman?
Yeah. I'm coming to that. So Sankhya philosophy is a dualistic system. So in philosophical hierarchy, Sankhya could be compared to primary school, and the Advaita can be compared to the highest level of knowledge, which not at primary school, never happens in primary school. So Sankhya system doesn't even believe in a monotheistic Godhead. Sankhya system is not only dualistic, The original early Sankhya is agnostic. And later Sankhya becomes semi-theistic, not completely. So Sankhya system is, it's remarkable and it's relevant only because it analyzes human mind, its functions, its various levels of manifestation. Apart from that, the Sankhya system does not posit one supreme reality. So all monotheistic systems and monism, they both are trying to explain one supreme reality. It may be a God, a creator in monotheistic religions, or in monism, accepting that, but going beyond that. Follow? So Sankhya, it's like comparing apple with orange. Maybe not entirely correct this, because apple and orange belong to entirely different types of fruits. I would say Sankhya system is some maybe better way of putting it. Sankhya system is a bridge board. It is relevant only so far as it analyzes human mind and emotions and feelings correctly. But Sankhya conclusion is, even metaphysically, it is contradictory.
All right. Well, maybe it
is even childish actually.
Maybe if I leave out Sankhya and just ask it in terms of Vedanta. So, what with the idea of animate versus inanimate? So, I'm considered, according to biology, animate, and then this chair is considered, according to biology, inanimate. Do they both have Atman in it? Is it just at different levels of frequency of consciousness, or?
Okay,
And maybe that's not the right question, but I'm trying to figure out what the right question is.
Inanimate, that you say Prakriti and Purusha. So Purusha is animate and doesn't have Chaitanya. So Purusha is Chaitanya, Prakriti has no Chaitanya, it's Jada. Prakriti is Jada, we call it Pradhana, Purusha is effulgent. Now the point is, strictly speaking, Vedanta tells you Atman is present everywhere, but Antakarana is not present. That's the difference. And so for example, even an animal, there is a sensation. An animal also thinks in its own primitive level, instinct. Instinct also a function of the presence of Atman within the animal. Very primitive function. Vivekananda, discussing this point, says that the difference between an amoeba and a Buddha is one of degrees, not of kind. The difference between an amoeba and Buddha. Amoeba is a very primitive organism. Amoeba. With the smallest, the most primitive possible manifestation of life is amoeba, roughly speaking. And Buddha, not necessarily Buddha, the Gautama Buddha. Buddha here means the enlightened one. Let us somebody as great as Buddha, spiritually enlightened person. Atman is present in both amoeba and also Buddha. But the problem is, in amoeba, it is manifesting in a very primitive manner. Okay?
What about the inanimate, what we consider inanimate? Okay.
Now coming to that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So something coming to that. In Buddha, it is manifesting in a much more supreme manner. The Antakarana, the mind-intellect complex, is very primitive in amoeba. It is maybe close to non-existent. In Buddha, it is highly evolved. Now, in a tree, in a plant, also it is present. But again, is present in a much more primitive manner. What about this rock or a chair? There, the Antakarana is not there. So, it is something like this. Suppose you have a mirror In fact, this is the example given in Panchadesi, a well-known book in Vedanta. You've got a mirror. You are showing the light, reflecting the light. If you show the mirror to a wall, on a wall, you can see a patch of light, a square-shaped patch of light, depending on the shape of the mirror, you can see. Light is everywhere, sunlight, but the light reflecting from the mirror will be reflecting on the wall as a special manifestation, a patch of light which appears to be distinct and different from the wall as such. So, in the wall also there is light, but this is manifesting through the mirror. And the mirror is comparable to the antakarana. We call antakarana, mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara. Mana means mind, buddhi means intellect, chitta means memory system, ahankara means I awareness. So, that's why you think of the wall or the chair as you mentioned, the plant and trees, the animals, the amoeba and Buddha. See different levels of manifestation of Atman. But on the wall, Antakarana is totally absent. So in manifesting in a non-existent manner, it doesn't exist at all. Because the patch of light is not seen because there is no mirror. Mirror corresponds to Antakarana.
So let me just make sure I got this correct. So in what we consider animate objects, like you said, Buddha or amoeba, that they have different levels of refinement of the Antakarana, where the wall, or what we consider inanimate, is still considered part of Brahman, but it doesn't have this Antakarana function. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Because again, see this, actually when you mention this, one problem here I want to warn you against this problem. What happens, when we read English translation saying Brahman is everywhere, people may immediately conclude, Brahman is there, the tree also Brahman, rock is a Brahman, rock is God, the tree is God, the ocean is God. That's not the implication. So that's a problem. That's why Advaita used to be taught in a very selective manner in ancient times. It was studied. So I want to, please listen carefully. Please wait. I tell you the reason for this question. Natural, sincere intellectual interest is very rewarding. It's a great value. But when we intellectually try to understand, you should remember, Advaita is primarily a matter of inner experience. Advaita is the only spiritual philosophical system which is not actually a philosophical system. It's state of spiritual experience. If you try to understand Advaita as a philosophical system, there will be absolutely no end to doubt, because anyone who reads an English book on Advaita without some interaction with the real teacher will conclude, oh, Hinduism tells you God is everywhere, the tree is God, this chair is God, the mic system is God. That's not what it means. Because if you exclude anything from God, from Atman, then you are accepting duality. You follow the point? Suppose you say the wall is something different, inanimate. The wall cannot be excluded from this one all-encompassing supreme one reality. That's why in Advaita there is no theory of evil, theory of error. And that's again, it's a great distinction between all monotheistic ideas and Advaita. Monism is Advaita. In Advaita there is no theory of evil. People become terrible beings, people do terrible things because they are not aware, they are not really their own true nature. Again, if you try to understand Advaita as a philosophy, very difficult to understand. Yeah, Atman is present everywhere. What about Hitler? Hitler also an Atman is present everywhere. You may say, it is terrible. So again, you have to understand, he had a terrible Antakarana. See, a mirror may reflect light. The mirror is highly distorted a red color, red light. Buddha, white, pure. So, depending upon our own evolution, we manifest Atman so many different ways. So, this manifestation also linked to the anubhuti. That's why Shankaracharya says, Sutya Yuktya Swanubhutya. Advaita, you study books, then you use your own reasoning power, then you should start practicing. At the beginning, not in one life, so Vedanta will tell you may become a dualist for 10,000 life cycles. You may remain a dualist. Another 10,000 life cycles, you may be a Mr. Advaita. And again only Advaita. So, gradual evolution. But in one lifetime, it can happen when our mind is ready for it. So, Advaita, the highest reach of understanding spirituality. When you reach that level of experience, then you understand there is no enemy, there is no otherness. Everyone is the same, everyone is part of a spiritual family. This again not a doctrine, not a metaphysical system. It is a matter of experience. The problem is always, we are trying to approach Advaita as a theological system which is very, very risky and very wrong. That's all I can say. Right. So because in other systems you believe in this, one may believe in God and do terrible things. That's a problem. That's a problem in monotheism. You may believe in God, you may be the worst human being in this world, the cruelest, the most monstrous, worse than animals. And still we may worship our own God. Advaita, there is no scope for that. When you approach this, when you accept this reality, Atman is present everywhere, everything, you cannot do harm to anyone. Why? Because Advaita becomes a matter of inner experience. And when you, even as a belief system, it has got a tremendous ethical dimension, relevance. As I mentioned earlier, when you believe in Advaita even as a doctrine, that makes you a very good, noble human being. You cannot hate anyone, you cannot do any harm to anyone. That's the problem. In all non-Advaitic systems, there is always the risk of, you may be a devotee of one God, I may hate everyone who worships the same God using a different language, reading a different book, using a different ritual. So that's why Advaita, according to Shankaracharya, Advaita is a matter of experience. Now we will conclude. Now we have announcements. Thank you. So very interesting discussion, Brian. That's very encouraging. Thank you. Now we have some important announcements, please remember. So, we have now approaching Christmas holidays. So, we have winter recess, Vivekachudamani class. So, there will be no class on Vivekachudamani for the next few weeks due to the winter recess. Just after Christmas night, from 25th, 26th onwards, we will have winter recess, Christmas recess. Classes resume on Friday, January 23rd, 2026, 7:30. So, we will reopen only in the third week of January. But we have some important programs in between. So, please remember, there will be no class for the next few weeks because of winter recess. Our classes will resume on Friday, January 23rd. At 7:30 p.m. Regarding winter recess, December 26, 2027 to January 17, 2026, there will be no in-person or online lectures or classes during the winter recess. Please remember, we will have no classes, either in-person or online lectures or classes during the winter recess. So, winter recess begins on December 26, 2025 to January 17, 2026. Christmas lecture, Thursday, December 25th, 11 a.m. in the new temple, 2323 Valley Street, San Francisco. 4 blocks away from here, we have Christmas lecture. On Christmas morning, a special lecture in honor of the birth of Jesus Christ will be delivered by Swami Tattwamayananda. Prior to the lecture, an account of Christ's nativity as recorded in the New Testament will be read. There will be a reading of nativity, a short lecture in the form of Christmas message on Thursday, December the 25th, 11 a.m. at the new temple, 2323 Valley Street, San Francisco, 4 blocks from here. Then we have a very important celebration on January 1st, 2026, 10 a.m. That is Thursday. Sri Sharada Devi's birthday, and also New Year's Day and Kalpataru Day. New Year's Day and Kalpataru Day and Holy Mother's birthday. Thursday, January the 1st, 2026, 10 a.m. New Temple Auditorium, please remember. 2323 Valley Street, San Francisco. Then we have Swami Vivekananda's birthday. Saturday, January 10th, 2026, 11 a.m. New Temple, 2323 Valley Street. We will observe Swami Vivekananda's birthday at the New Temple on Saturday, January the 10th at 10 a.m. For more information, please visit our website, vedanta.org. Please remember, normally we used to have winter retreat just after January 1st. But this time, because we have an important celebration on January 10th, so we won't be able to hold winter retreat this year. So please remember, Christmas lecture, Thursday, December 25th, 11 a.m., New Temple, 2323 Valley Street. Again, New Year's Day, Kalpataru Day and Holy Mother's birthday, Thursday, January the 1st. That is the first day of 2026, 10 a.m. New Temple. Then Swami Vivekananda's birthday, Saturday, January 10th, 2026, 10 a.m. That's a New Temple. So, if you want any more information, please see our website, vedanta.org. Thank you. And I wish all of you a happy Christmas and happy New Year Day. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.